Okay, we're back. Reishis Chochma. We are in Perek Shlishi Siv Chof Hey in the edition that I'm using. Uh, Nimtzil Fiza. So it comes according to what we learned. Ki abusha she'adam bizboshesh milachto ba'avor ashchina, that the shame that a person is like really ashamed to sin because of the divine presence for many reasons that we mentioned before. You don't want to seem ungrateful. You know that the Shekhinah is everywhere. So for all the reasons that you don't want, you're embarrassed to sin because the Shekhinah is in front of you. Shu atzo mash pishubat tikunim. Right, this is exactly what the type of yira that the tikkunes are talking about. It's the busha of sinning before the Shekhinah that could take you to the higher level of yira, that's represented by the higher hay, right? So the lower hay is the midah of Shekhinah, and you're embarrassed to sin in front of the Shekhinah, and then through that you could progress to the higher year of being a yorei chet. You just don't want to do the wrong thing, right? That's a higher form of yira. Vumash pishvei kunim. And now this is what it says in the Tikkunei Zohar. The Yira Katira Ba'anova, Yiras Hashem, is tied together with humility. Right? Ki Yimoshech Mizeh Heyoso Anav Shoyashiv Al Cherpasa Yifahalu Ki Yor Bisposhish Lo Yifnei HaMelech Shel Fonav. Now, how does Yira now lead you to Anova? Right? Well, what's the sign of Anova? Another humility is that you're not makbid on your covet. Now, what's a case where you're forced to be mochel on your covet? You're in front of a great king and someone insults you, right? But you're in presence of the king, so you're not going to answer the guy back, and you're not going to lose your composure because you're in front of a great king. So you're just going to have to let it ride. Well, the same thing. If you have yira and you realize the Shekhinah is always in front of you, right? You'll never lose it with someone else because, you're in front of the great king that you can't lose your composure in front of him. And that's, Melech Malchei Amlochim, Mamish Midas Malchusa Yisbarach. You're afraid and you're embarrassed to answer back anyone that insulted you or denigrate you if you're in the presence of a king. Right, and that was the secret of Moshe Rabbeinu. He was, the most humble of all people. Right, and yet also there was no Navi like Moshe. Hashem upon him. Right, there was no prophet like Moshe that was so intimate with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, knew him, face to face. And not only that, Moshe Rabbeinu is the only prophet that could get prophecy on demand. That's why he had to leave his wife, because he could get nevuah at any time, so he can never afford to be tamei, right? That's why he had to disengage from family life. So what's being pointed out, he says it's already the name of the Tikkun Zohar, that these two things aren't disjointed. His being super humble and is always like being in the presence of God. And that's why it had to be Perish Mina Isha, which the Chazal learn out that Hashem agreed with him being Perish Mina Isha from the Pasuk, Vata po amori mari, you stand with me. Everyone else goes back to Lechem, everyone go back to their tent, to their earthly affairs. You are standing in front of me. So the two go together. If you're always standing in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, like Moshe is perpetually, you got to be humble, because you always are in front of Hashem, so you can't lose your composure in the presence of Hashem. So if anyone insults you, does anything against you, you keep quiet because you're in the presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So Moshe was most real with the fact he's always in the presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So therefore, Vaish Moshe Anav mode, right? For that very reason, if you know the king's in front of you, you never lose your composure with anybody, right? Vainu Omro, and this is what it means, what the pasuk says in Mishle. Ekev Anova Yershem, the heel of humility is Yers Hashem, right? Pirush, that means to say, Sof Madregas Anova Yiras Hashem, right? The end of the Madrega of Anova is Yiras Hashem. Kamo Sha'ekev Sof Kufa Adam, right? like just like the the heel is the bottom of the person. So Ekiv Anova Yiras Hashem, where Anova ends, that's where Yiras Hashem is. Right? And now since you say Anova ends by Yiras Hashem, there has to be a connection between the two. If the other one starts when the other one ends, so there's got to be a connection. All right, she's so now it must be, there must be sometimes, point of union that, where one ends, the other one starts. So there's got to be this meeting point or this causation that one leads into the other. If one, picks up where the other one leaves off. Right. So now where they meet, like what could be like the common denominator where the two meet, where does like, where does Yira border on Anova? Where does Anova border on Yira? Well, I'll tell you where he says, I hesitate to say Venn diagram because there's a crazy cackling politician that always talks about how she likes Venn diagrams. So I just can't even say Venn diagrams, which talks about how the two overlap, right? But okay, but that's what he said. Where is the meeting point between Anova and Yira? So that's Yira mitzah boshes panim. That's Yira that you have because you're ashamed to sin. And why are you ashamed to sin? Because you acknowledge the king is always in front of you. Right? Busha. It's not sin, fear of consequences. Because fear of Yiras ha'onesh, which is the lower Yira. Right? Yiras ha'onesh, well, listen, even if the cop is not in front of you, they'll catch you. Eventually they'll catch you. Right? Yira mitzah busha is that, you're being watched right now. You're embarrassed to sin. That's being cognizant of the king being in front of you. All right, so that same busha that cause you to be ashamed to sin, that same busha will also cause anova. You don't lose your composure and you don't lash out on someone, right? Which everyone will admit, and ideally is a petty thing to do. You should ignore him or not care. Not care, right? So, okay, so you can't afford to be petty in front of the king. So the busha, which is the acknowledgement that you're in the presence of the king, that causes Yira, that acknowledgement that you're in the presence of the king, it also causes another. Here's a Bir Bazar Shonos. Now this aspect of Yira was explained in the Zohar as follows. Rabbi Yitzchak Pasuk, Yitzchak open. The Ches Hashem me'olam v'ad olam ha'yirav. The Ches Hashem is forever and ever on those who fear him. Right? Yira causes Ches Hashem upon you. It's a pasuk. Right, so Rabbi Yitzchak in the Zohar explains, how great is Yira before HaKadosh Baruch Hu, like how much Hashem values a person who has Yira Shemayim, right? Shebechal Yira Anava, because Yira is inclusive of Anava. So obviously we're talking about Yira of Busha, the Yira that happens because you are, always aware that you're in the presence of the Shekhinah. Right, and so now, if that's where your year is coming from, that that shorish of awareness that you're in presence of the Shekhinah is also going to bring to anava. Ubechla anava chasidus, and anava will bring you to be lifnim mishur sadin chasidus. Chasid, get it? Chesed. That you're going to be mischased im kono. Ezu chased am mischased im kono. That you're not going to do just the fee what the halacha demands. Right? You're going to do even more. You do. That's chasidus. Chasidus that you do chesed with Hashem. You're not just doing lefi shur sadin, right? So you get it. That's why chesed Hashem, chasidus, right? Hashem responds, mina kamida. You're a chesed with him. Why? Because of your yira. Because your yira brings you to anava. Anava brings you to chasidus. And therefore, the Chesed Hashem, you do for him lefnim mishur sadin, he'll do for you lefnim mishur sadin, and give you more to deserve. Chesed Hashem elnav al yirev, because Yira leads to Anava, which leads to Chasidus. Nimtza, so it comes out like this. Shekomi sheish bo yiras chet. Anyone has yiras chet, yeshno bechulad, he automatically, if it's yiras chet that comes from busha, right? That it leads directly into Anova, which leads into Chasidus. And the other thing is, the other thing is true also. If you got no Yerushalayim, you can be sure you won't have Anova, you won't have Chasidus. Akal Shono. This is Lashazor Vodikan. Always para be Europe, Basofa, Perakavazar. We're going to explain even more about Yiras Chet. This level called Yiras Chet per se at the end of next Perek. Right, Chazak, we just now finished Perek Shlishi of Reishis Chochma. Without further ado, let's take a running jump into Perek Revi'i. So Perek Revi'i, right? Bebir Kama Bechinas Yiras Chet. So now we're going to go through different levels of this level called Yiras Chet, which is higher than Yiras HaOnesh. So, presently, we're going to explain a lot of different aspects that there are as far as Yiras Chet. Right? Rishona, number one level of one aspect of Yiras Chet. Yiras Chet, to be genuine about it, right? Is that you better, be really fearing of sin. Again, fearing Yiras Chet. Not Yiras Onesh. Yiras Chet, you are afraid to sin. Well, afraid to sin means that you don't want to come to sin. Even b'shogeg, you fear sin. So you fear sin like you fear a accident, right? So let's say shogeg is an accident. If you don't want to be, you fear getting into an accident, which is shogeg. So you'll take precautions. So Yiras Chet is that you shouldn't come lidei chet afil b'shogeg. Va'atam. So now we're going to get deeper. This is like self-explanatory, but he goes deeper. Al pi yisaidus of Torah Tasod. Because your soul is a very delicate spiritual being that came from a very high place in heaven. Any sin, even if it's done b'shogeg, damages the soul. All right, so let's say even shogeg, you're less punishable than mazid. That's not a svara to say, okay, so I'll just make sure that I never sin intentionally. If it ever happen, it'll be unintentional. It's bad for your spiritual health, right? So, if a person takes poison, b'shogeg, right? Well, he shouldn't die. Well, he's not guilty of suicide if he took these poison b'shogeg. So he's not guilty of suicide, right? But don't expect it to not kill him, right? So he won't be chayiv out suicide because it was b'shogeg, right? But it's unhealthy. Same thing with a chet b'shogeg. Even if it's not ro'i la'onesh the way mazid is, it still damages your nefesh. He gives a simpler mashal. Right? If by accident you on your nice white, shirt, right? You put on, you pour a pot, pot full of oil or pot full of ink. Even if that b'shogeg, right? The garment still becomes stained. And this is what Shalom was saying, warning us, because at all times let your garments be white, and oil on your head should not be lacking. Right? At all times, your garments should be white. Right? At all times, meaning at all times that they should be white. That even unintentionally they should never become. At all times, even when there should be no accidents either. Chazal very stringent about this and explaining the Tanchuma, and this Tanchuma is also brought in the Yalkut on the pasuk v'nefesh ki sechta b'shkaga, when a nefesh does a sin b'shogeg, right? Mashal lema davar dama says the Tanchuma, when a nefesh does a chet b'shogeg. Two people sinned to the king. Echad kartai v'echad ben paltin. Now, one guy was he lived in the city, right? He was he lived, in the city. He was a city dweller. The other guy lived in the palace. Rosh Hashanah chatu cherech. He saw that they both sinned the same sin, whatever it was. They both, violated the king's rules with the same legal transgression. Nasan leben paltin ifusin. Right. So now he, right. He looked away. Right. Right. He looked away. Pana, he looked away. He turned the other way as far as the city dweller doing this transgression. But he gave a strict sentence to the palace dweller. So now the people who lived in the other palace residents said to the king, right? So to the guy from the city, you look the other way, but your guy who's, he's your best friend. He serves in front of you in the palace. You gave him a gzar din, you gave him a strict sentence. And he would say, Malchus, to the city dweller, I look the other way because he doesn't know. He's not so well versed in what how to act in front of a king. Right, just right. But the king, the person who's in the palace that stands with me every single day, and he knows, the royal etiquette of what's expected, and he still does, against me. He knows kinune malchus and imuse malchus, and he's still chote, right? Afkach, so aguf kartani. You know what the city dweller is? That's the body, your guf. Right? Because it says, Hashem made our body out of dirt from the earth. Va'nefesh ben palten, but the soul is from the king's palace. Because right? Hashem blew into him a breath of life. Right, so your body is from the earth, right? It's the city dweller. It's not someone that lives in the palace, but your neshama comes from the king's palace. Came from HaKadosh Baruch Hu's breath, kivyachol. And now, when a sin is done, they both sin. They both commit the sin. Kacha kosav matmiya, and that's how the pasuk is actually asking it as a question. V'nefesh kisachta. A soul could sin? How could a soul sin? That's also right? How could the soul sin? We call mitzvahs, right? So the pasuk goes on, so let's say it's sin, bishkaga in all the mitzvahs. Hashem, right? So that when the nefesh, which should know better, the nefesh. No, not the guf, but the nefesh that should know better because it came from heaven. It came from the palace of the king. So what it does, like b'shoking, it's as if it was over on all Hashem's mitzvahs. Chen omer, and the pasuk also says, v'chisish also es kol mitzvahs. If you're shogeg and you don't do any of the mitzvahs, that it's obviously the literal shot in pasuk is that you are shogeg in any one of the mitzvahs, but it could be read you're shogeg in all the mitzvahs. We have high expectations from the nefesh that even if it did one aver b'shogeg, it let us down, it let Hashem down, as if it was over on all the mitzvahs. V'omer shkios miyovin over, and that's also what the pasuk says. Shkios miyovin, shkios, who can understand? So the way it's being said to be read over here in this medrash is that how can you understand, how the nefesh could even do an avera b'shogeg, right? We go gam mizem chasoch avdecha shkigas Talmud oile zara, and then the pasuk goes on, says gam mizem, now save us from zaydim, from evil people, but also zayk miloshin mizaydim mezid. Save us from being mazid, because shigas Talmud ola zodon, because as the pasuk says, when you make a mistake in your learning, right, that could lead to mazid. That oh, that could lead. Sorry, I was just something's on my mind. Right, that could lead to mazid. Akal shalom liyanenu. Right, this is the lashon of the Tanchuma. As far as we're concerned, right. Arei b'feirush. Right. So it comes out clearly. Sha'onish lenefesh mitzad shaya ben paltin ben hechal melcha elyon. Right, that the onesh that you give the nefesh, which is the nefesh of the palace, came from the king's palace, because it came from the hechal of hamelcha elyon. And the nefesh should know the etiquette that the king expects. Shiat torshon so krambolam, and how does it know so much? Not just that it came from heaven and it's familiar with the ways of heaven, right? But also don't forget the nefesh learned the whole Torah, right, before it was born. And not only that, it's more than that, says the Reishis Chochma, right? You get a refresher course in the king's etiquette every single night, because every single night when you go to sleep, your nefesh goes up to Hashem and gives confession on everything it did on that day. All right, so you came from the heaven and you got a good education there. They taught you the whole Torah before you were born, and every night you go back to heaven, so you get a refresher course every single night, knowing what the king expects from you, what the etiquette, the nimusei hamelech are, right? Right. That's choyam lagir maserav kir pirshvazal mishocheves chekecha shmor pischei picha. Right, like the Zohar says, the pasuk, from those who sleep, watch what your mouth is going to say. Meaning, when you sleep, your neshama is going to sing like a canary and say, everything you did that day. I think is how the Zohar understands the pasuk. Not only that, if you keep the nefesh pure, right? All right, so now when it goes up, you could go learn in the Masifta de Rakia while, at nighttime. It's in night school, the Masifta de Rakia. The pure nefesh is, the higher place it could go to in the Masifta de Rakia. We're going to talk more about this in further in the Sefer of like how it's so important to keep yourself pure. Not only that you should not have bad dreams at night, and you know what I'm talking about, as we're in Shovavim. It's just so important to stay pure, because instead of just not having bad dreams of all types, when you go to sleep, your nefesh goes to Masirukiyah and learns Torah that, you could become conscious of the next day if you actually learn something. And it's also an energizing experience, but you got to keep the nefesh pure, that the nefesh could have that energizing and educational experience when it goes to heaven and when you go to sleep. So now, by the way, we can also learn, that what we mean that at night you stand with Hashem, right, and right. Also, is al Torah that refers to someone who learns Torah. Right, that refers to also people learning Torah at night. Lav dafka that you go to sleep and the nefesh goes up, but also you have a special closeness to Hashem when you're up at night learning Torah instead of going to sleep, which are, by the way, the 2 days in the Gemara. Why was night created? So Mandor L'Shena, Mandor L'Torah. So the Mandor L'Shena, so the nefesh goes up to be with Hashem. The Mandor L'Torah, you'll be with Hashem that way. Right? Pour out your heart like water before Hashem. So it says, Chazal say on that pasuk, on Eicha, right, that a person, that learns Torah Shebechsan, Torah Shebach, sits opposite you and learns it with you. So now, of course, the Lomei Torah knows Nimusei Malchus, because he's learning Torah, so he's learning the etiquette of the king. And not that, the king himself is teaching it to him, because when you learn, Hashem learns with you. So you're getting like really, literally a first-hand education. It's not even second-hand, like learning from the Torah Hashem wants. Hashem learns the Torah with you. So it comes out that either way, there's bigger expectations from a Lomei Torah. There's bigger expectations from the Nefesh. Rishon LeLikavay says that the first shot that at night you stand with Hashem, it is going on the Nefesh, and you got to keep the Nefesh pure. That's why you really should be sure not to sin. Right. I will do one more. Lefi divrei medrash. And the guf owners. Now, according to Medrash, does say, the guf is the kartanis, the city dweller didn't know better. It sounds like the body doesn't get punished for sins, only the soul. But we know from different medrash in Vayikra Rabbah that says that the neshama and guf, both of them get punished. Which, by the way, I don't know, the Gemara and Son, I don't know why he's not bringing the Gemara. Maybe he'll bring it later. Oh, he brings it, Gemara and Sanhedrin, I see, glancing ahead. Famous Gemara and Sanhedrin that, Antius asked Rebbe, how could God punish a man? The body will frame the soul for the sin, the soul will frame the body for the sin. And Rebbe says he judges them as one. I see he's going to bring that Gemara, but he first wants to ask like a stira in Midrash, one's a Tanchum, one's a Rabbah. Asked in a Medrash Rabbah, it says that the body and soul are both punished like one. And it brings, that Medrash also brings the famous, the same mashal that the Gemara that Rebbe said for Antoninus in the Gemara Sanhedrin, right? That there's the crippled sighted man. If the crime is stealing an apple from the king's orchard, well, one guy could see, but he's crippled. The other guy is able-bodied, but he's blind. So the crippled sighted guy gets on the shoulders of the able-bodied guy, and that's how they pull off the caper of stealing apples from the king's orchard. Right. So like the sighted crippled guy is the neshama, because it doesn't crippled, meaning it has no place in this world. Legs is what we need, but it's sighted, it's enlightened, right? And the able-bodied blind guy, that's the body. He's got strong legs, he's on earth, but he's blind, he's not enlightened, right? And that's when that's the partnership between body and soul. Right? There's the partnership of when they do crimes together. Right? Right, so that's what the pasuk says. Yikra Shemayim al v'artzadin. Hashem calls heaven and earth together to judgment together. Yikra Shemayim al v'eshama. So he called for heaven to bring the soul, and from the earth to bring the body. Right, to judge his nation, or they're doing emo to judge them together. And also it seems, from the Gemara in Sanhedrin, which says all this of the Medrash and more, it seems that the body does get punished also. Okay, so he's just pointing out he wants to be, he wants to be inclusive. Okay, but you can understand that even if they're both punished, the body's not punished the same way the soul is punished. Right? So it's not such a contradiction, but he wants to make you aware that, from the, if you take the Medrash Tanchuma that we learned before, literally it sounds like the body doesn't get punished at all, but we know that not to be true. Yes, and it's before each other. So we have to say that, the Medrash was talking derech kuzma. It's not the body gets a free ride totally, but, obviously a commuted sentence relative to how Hashem is really going to take the neshama to big task on this, because it should know better. Okay, we will stop here for today.